Well, for more perspective on the ownership of antiquities and the debate, I'm joined by Andrew Saluti. He's an assistant professor at the School of Design at Syracuse University and program coordinator in the graduate program of Museum Studies. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the conditions under which an artifact is considered stolen versus sold fairly, given the difficulty in trying to trace some of these pieces that are thousands of years old.
It's the biggest challenge that Egypt has right now with this lawsuit. It's the burden of proof to say that the object was not rightfully obtained by the owner before certain laws were passed. In 1970, you have UNESCO and their convention that regulated the sale of antiquities, and then Egypt's own laws in 1983 dictate how objects can leave the country legally. So it's the burden of proof is very, very hard to figure out.
So then, given that obviously the individual countries have their own laws, you have some of these UNESCO sites. Now, who is it that makes the final determination as to whether an artifact is stolen?
I think again, it's a gray area. It depends on the particular situation. I think you have some international bodies. I know Interpol has been involved in a lot of these disputes, and there's also some responsibility of the institutions themselves. Now, in this particular case, this is a private sale, which is another layer entirely. But museum institutions have been self-regulating themselves and doing a lot of the provenance research to figure out exactly where these objects are coming from and who they really belong to.
So let's look at the process. What process can and should some of these auction houses use to ensure that they're not selling stolen pieces?
This part of curatorial research is it can be challenging, but in this particular case, I think Christie's has to their credit, they've done their due diligence. They've traced the ownership back well into the 70s, and are also claiming that the object, claiming that they know the ownership into the 60s. Now, this is the small bit of gray area that Egypt is contesting. Because there is no tangible proof, it's only the word of the owners who had it before 1974. This is the biggest challenge.
So how big of a problem is this overall as an issue in the auction world?
This is a very large problem. This is a focus of what a lot of the researchers have to do, what a lot of auction houses have to spend their time on, is making sure that they can rightfully trace the ownership of these antiquities, of these art objects, back to a bill of sale, some sort of primary resource document that says that this was allowed to happen, this was allowed to leave a country.
Now, in some cases, they have traced ownership, but a lot of countries are having problems getting these pieces back from museums, saying things like perhaps they don't have adequate storage for them in the home countries. So what are some examples of successful claims that actually did result in some of these pieces being returned?
Egypt has actually had some successful repatriation situations. Ethiopia has had some success making sure that objects get back. I think some of the more modern cases that we can point to are the stolen loot from the Nazi regime, the reclaimed objects from World War II, and here in the States we have the Native American objects that are being placed back with the Native American tribes that they belong in.
And you mentioned that distinction between a private sale, as with Christie's, but what about museums? What sort of responsibility do they have when it comes to ensuring transparency about the source of their pieces?
Museum collections are held in a public trust, so they do bear the greatest responsibility, in my opinion, to make sure that they have accurate and legal provenance for each of these objects. Because this is not a private collection, because it's not somebody's personal object, this is an object that's held for the public good, for research, for academic purposes. So they have almost the greatest burden of provenance and the greatest amount of responsibility to make sure that the objects that they have belong to them.
And just quickly, what role do you see technology playing in really helping with the transparency and tracing some of the rightful owners and sort of the path that some of these pieces are taking?
That's a really interesting question. Right now, there are a lot of innovative databases that are being proposed, one particularly for Egyptian artifacts, where they want to be able to trace all artifacts, whether or not they were legally obtained, stolen, basically creating a master database of Egyptian works. I don't know where that particular database is in terms of how active it is or how complete it is, but I think that technology can give us the opportunity to be able to say, even if we don't have the object in front of us, we know where it is, we know where it was, and we know where it was 20 years ago.
Certainly very important. Thank you so much. Andrew Saluti there from the School of Design at Syracuse University and Program Coordinator in the Graduate Program of Museum Studies.